You are standing in your driveway at 9:14 in the morning, keys in your hand, and your neighbor Dan is backing out for work in the same gray Honda he's had for 6 years. He waves. You wave back. He doesn't ask why you're still standing there, and you don't offer it. This is the fourth month of weekday mornings that look like this. No commute, no badge, no reason to be anywhere by 9. You get in your car anyway because today you actually do have somewhere to be. A dealership on South Lamar has been holding a car for you since Friday, paid for, waiting on paperwork. You pull out of the driveway a few seconds after Dan does, going the opposite direction, toward a form you haven't seen yet. Cash purchase, no employer listed. Roy has done this 1,000 times, which is why he doesn't rush it. He's the finance manager at the dealership on South Lamar, and he's good at his job. And his job right now is trying to help you fill out a form you don't know how to fill out. You're buying the 911 Carrera in the showroom window. Guards red, the color you picked because it was the least sensible option on the sheet. $105,000, wired from a brokerage account, no loan, no lender, nothing left to negotiate. This should be the easy kind of sale. Roy still needs the form filled out because any payment over $10,000 gets reported to the IRS, and the form has a line for occupation and a line for employer, and you're sitting there with a pen in your hand like it's a pop quiz you didn't study for. You haven't worked in 4 months. You tell him that. He nods like he's heard it before, though you can tell he hasn't. Not from someone your age. Not for a car like this. He tries again. Gentler, this time. Self-employed? Consulting? Between things? You say no to all three because none of them are true and the true answer doesn't have a box. He's not being difficult. He's doing exactly what the form asks him to do, and the form was built for a version of buying things that assumes the money and the job arrive together, one explaining the other. Paycheck, then purchase. Nobody built a line for money that showed up 15 years ago and has been quietly multiplying in an index fund ever since, untouched, unexplained, invisible to anyone who isn't you. You write retired in the blank. It looks wrong on the page, the way a word looks wrong when you've never said it about yourself out loud. Roy reads it, looks up at you, jeans, a Patagonia pullover with a coffee stain near the pocket, a Timex you've had since college, and looks back down at the paperwork like the math isn't mathing. He doesn't ask the age question directly. He asks if you won something, a settlement, a suit, a lottery ticket. You tell him no. He waits for more. You don't give him more, not because you're hiding it, but because the real answer takes longer than a finance office has time for. The truth is boring in a way nobody at a dealership wants to hear. There was no windfall. There was no single Wednesday where the number arrived all at once. There was a paycheck, and then a smaller version of that paycheck spent, and then whatever was left doing something on its own, quietly, for a decade and a half, while you went to work and came home and mostly forgot it was happening. Roy finishes the form the best he can. Occupation. None listed. He slides the keys across the counter, and for a second neither of you says anything because he's still trying to figure out what kind of person pays cash for a Porsche and can't answer the first question on the paperwork. You get it. You spent 38 years assuming the two things went together too. The job told you who you were, and the money was just what happened while you were being someone. It took a long time to understand that the second part could keep going long after the first part stopped, and longer still to understand exactly how it had. How the $1.3 million happened. The number that mattered more than anything, Roy asked you that afternoon, didn't happen at a dealership. It happened on a Thursday night 4 months earlier at your kitchen table, with a laptop open and a mug of coffee gone cold next to it. You'd logged into Vanguard the way you did most nights, half out of habit, half checking the mail. The number on the screen read $1,300,412. You sat there for a second before it landed. Then you took a screenshot, the way you always did, and you didn't send it to anyone. Not your sister, not the group chat, not a single person who would have understood what it meant. You just sat with it, in a quiet kitchen, at 11 at night, and let yourself feel something you didn't have a name for yet. It didn't arrive all at once. You started at 23, at a fab outside Round Rock, testing wafers for $58,000 a year. You put 10% into the 401k because a coworker named Dale told you to in the break room without much explanation beyond future you will thank you. You didn't think about it again for a long time. The raises came slowly and then not so slowly. 31, then 44, then 70,000 a year and a title with senior in it. By the time you left, you were making $167,000. And if you'd spent the way your income grew, you'd have a bigger apartment, a car on payments, a closet that needed its own zip code. Instead, your spending barely moved. 52,000 a year in, 52,000 out more or less for over a decade. That gap is the whole story. 15 years and you put in about $540,000 of your own money. 401k contributions, then maxing them once you were making enough to, then a taxable brokerage account once the 401k was full. The market did the rest. Another 760,000 compounding while you were in meetings about yield rates, completely indifferent to whether you were paying attention. 540 plus 760 is 1,300,000, and $52,000 a year times 25 is exactly that. 25 times your spending is the number where the math says the money can support you for good. A rule with decades of market history behind it. Not a guess, not a hope. You didn't set out to hit an equation. You set out to keep your spending flat while your paycheck grew, and one Thursday night, the equation had already been hit for you. You told Dale, eventually, months later, over beers. He asked if you felt different. You said not yet. That wasn't a lie exactly, it just took longer to show up than a single moment could hold. It showed up in smaller ways, spread out, in how you looked at your calendar, in how a bad email stopped feeling like a threat. What you didn't expect was how much of it you'd carry alone, not because anyone would begrudge you the number, because there was nowhere to put it down that anyone else could pick up. You'd find that out for real the following Wednesday, standing in a building that opens at 9. First weekday, with nowhere to be. The Yarborough Branch Library opens at 9, and you're there at 9:04, which tells you something about how the morning has gone so far. You didn't plan to come here. You woke up at your usual time out of habit more than alarm, and got as far as making coffee before you understood there was nothing after the coffee. No Slack notifications lighting up the corner of your screen. No stand-up at 9:30. No email from your manager, a guy named Walt, who used to send them at 6 a.m. like it proved something. The apartment was just quiet, in a way that felt less like peace and more like a room with the furniture removed. So you drove to the library on Hancock Drive, because it was open and free and air-conditioned, and because sitting at home with the silence felt like something you needed to practice for before you tried it. Inside, at a table by the window, there's a man who looks like he's been coming here for years. He's got a newspaper folded in quarters and a thermos, and he's parked in the same spot every time you glance over, like the seat has his name on it. Somewhere around your third visit, he asks, without looking up, "What happened to you?" Not "what do you do?" What happened? You tell him. Semiconductor engineer, 15 years out since spring. He nods slowly like he's turning it over and says he was a supervisor for the water utility for 30 years before his knees told him it was over. 61 when he stopped. He says, the two of you are probably the only people under 70 in this building on a Wednesday who aren't here to escape something. You laugh, but it lands closer to true than either of you says out loud. That afternoon, you go to the DPS office to renew your license because it expired and you'd been putting it off. And the form has the same 2 lines the dealership form had. Occupation, employer. You write retired this time without hesitating over the pen, which surprises you more than the word does. The woman behind the counter glances at your date of birth, then back at your face, and doesn't say anything. She's seen enough forms to know when a question isn't worth asking. Outside, you sit in the parking lot for a minute before starting the car. It isn't sadness exactly, it's something closer to the sound after a room goes empty. Nobody around who knows what 4 months feels like from the inside, or what it costs to get here, or what to say to someone who isn't at work on a Wednesday and doesn't seem to be dying. Every person you know is still in a building somewhere, running on somebody else's clock. You're the only one who stepped off it, and there's no group text for that. You'll come back to the library the next week and the week after. Some part of it starts to feel less like hiding and more like a habit, the kind nobody claps for, the kind that doesn't look like much from the outside, but adds up anyway, the same way the money did. The automatic transfer that built this. The notification comes in while you're standing in the checkout line at the Whole Foods on Airport Boulevard, a carton of eggs and a bag of coffee in your basket, waiting for the guy in front of you to find his wallet. Vanguard. Dividend reinvestment complete. $214.18. You almost don't look at it. It's the kind of alert that used to arrive between meetings, get glanced at, and disappear into the background of a Wednesday that had 40 other things happening in it. But there are no other things happening in this Wednesday. So you actually read it, standing there with a carton of eggs, and you understand something you'd never quite stopped to notice before. The money is still doing this, without you. For 15 years, every 2 weeks, a transfer went out of your checking account and into an index fund before you were awake enough to talk yourself out of it. You set it up at 24, a recurring $300, back when $300 felt like a real sacrifice, and you upped it every time you got a raise until it was closer to $2,000 a month. You barely thought about it after the first year. It became like brushing your teeth, not a decision anymore, just a thing that happened on a schedule, quietly, while you were busy being a person with a job and a commute and opinions about the office coffee. Nobody ever noticed it. That was the strange part, standing in that checkout line. Nobody threw you a party for the transfer that went out on a random Wednesday in 2019 for $1,100. No one congratulated you the month you bumped it up after a promotion. It wasn't a story anyone could tell at a dinner. It was just money leaving your account before you could spend it, over and over for so long that it stopped feeling like discipline and started feeling like nothing at all. And now here it is, still running. You haven't touched the settings in months. The dividends land, the fund reinvests them automatically, the number grows a little without any input from you, the same as it did back when you had a paycheck feeding it. You built a machine and you switched jobs and the machine didn't notice. It's still doing on a Wednesday morning what it was built to do, whether or not you're the one standing in the kitchen watching it happen. You pay for the eggs and the coffee. $22, tapped from a debit card connected to an account that, at this point, mostly just exists so you have somewhere to put grocery money. You don't say anything to the cashier. There's nothing to say. This is the kind of thing that only means something to you. In the 15 seconds after a notification, you almost swiped away, holding a basket in a checkout line, feeling something settle in your chest that isn't triumph exactly. It's quieter than that. It's closer to knowing you did something right a long time ago and are only now getting to watch it keep being right, one small transfer at a time, without anyone else needing to know. You think about texting someone. You don't. Some things don't translate into a message. You just put the eggs in the passenger seat and drive home, and somewhere in the back of your mind you're already thinking about lunch on Thursday, with someone who's never once had a Wednesday like this one. Someone who's still on the other side of the machine, still feeding it, still years from finding out what it feels like when it finally starts feeding itself. Lunch with a friend, still climbing. Danielle picks the restaurant, which she always does, and this time it's Perry's on West 6th, the kind of place with white tablecloths and a pork chop everyone orders because everyone else already told them to. She gets there before you, which never used to happen, and when you sit down, you notice the watch first. A Cartier Tank Louis, gold, the kind of thing you clock without meaning to. Promotion gift, she says, catching you looking. Director, as of March. She says it like she's still getting used to saying it. Then, almost in the same breath, must be nice. She says it twice over the next hour, and the second time isn't a joke. You've known Danielle since your second year at the Fab, back when she was a process engineer 2 cubicles over, and you split a vending machine habit that neither of you has ever fully quit. She's sharp in the way people get promoted for being sharp, and she took every rung she was offered, which is exactly why she's sitting across from you now, making $220,000 a year and telling you, quietly over a pork chop, that she's stuck. Her mortgage alone is $4,300 a month, out in Circle C. 2 kids, one in private school already, one starting next year. A lease on a BMW X5 X-Drive 40i because Circle C parents don't drive Tacomas. Not out loud, they don't. By the time everything clears, she's spending close to $198,000 a year. And out of what's left, she's putting away about $22,000. Good money, real discipline, more than most people manage. You do the math without meaning to, the same way you did it for yourself at the kitchen table 4 months ago. 25 times what she spends is close to $5 million. She's 41 with maybe 400,000 saved. The gap between where she is and where she'd need to be isn't just wide, it moves. Every raise she takes pushes the number further out. Because the number was never about what she earns, it's about what she keeps, and what she keeps has been shrinking every year she's climbed. You don't say any of this. You just listen. In your Patagonia pullover and the Timex you've had since you were 22, next to someone whose watch costs more than your car payment used to be, back when you had one. She picks up the check without looking at it, the way people do when the amount stopped registering a long time ago. You let her. It would cost you something you can't name to explain that you could pay for lunch every day for the rest of your life and never notice, and that saying so out loud would only make the table feel smaller. Walking out, she asks, mostly as a joke, what you even do all day. You tell her about the library, and Dale from the Fab and the eggs. She laughs, but there's a beat underneath it, a half second where you can see her actually picture it. The mornings, the nobody waiting on you of it, before she checks her phone and says she has a 2 o'clock. You watch her walk to the X5, already back inside, the day she never left. And you think about the number chasing her further out with every good year she has. Then you think about your own number, and the 2 lines that are supposed to work together but don't, and the phone call you still have to make before your health coverage renews next month. Capital gains versus the ACA cliff. You take the call sitting on the patio at Radio Coffee, laptop open, a cortado going lukewarm next to you, because the deadline for next year's health coverage is in 9 days, and you've been putting off actually dealing with it since Danielle picked up the check. The broker's name is Teresa. She works out of a strip mall office near Anderson Lane and does this for a living, walking people like you through healthcare.gov, because the marketplace doesn't come with a person unless you go looking for one. She pulls up your application while you sit there half listening to a couple 2 tables over debate whether to get the migas. What are you expecting for income next year? She asks. Not what you made. What you're expecting. Because for the first time in your life, that's a number you choose instead of one that happens to you. You tell her you were planning to pull around $52,000 from your brokerage account to live on, mostly by selling shares you've held for years. She goes quiet for a second, the kind of quiet that means she's doing math you haven't done yet. Here's the part nobody explains at a dealership or a library or a lunch table. Money you've held more than a year gets its own tax treatment, separate from a paycheck. This year, a single filer can realize up to $49,450 in capital gains and pay 0 federal tax on it, and the standard deduction adds another $15,000 on top of that. Add those together, and you can pull $64,450 out of Vanguard next year, and the IRS won't touch a dollar of it. You did the math back in the spring. It felt like a loophole built for exactly your situation. Teresa is the one who tells you about the other line. Your health coverage subsidy, the thing that makes a marketplace plan affordable instead of catastrophic, cuts off completely at 400% of the federal poverty line. For a single person this year, that's $62,600. Not a taper, not a slow reduction, a cliff. The extra help that used to soften that edge expired at the start of this year, so the old rule is back in full. $1 over $62,600, and the subsidy doesn't shrink. It disappears. You sit with that for a second, cortado forgotten. 64,450, 62,600. 2 numbers that were never supposed to have anything to do with each other, sitting $1,850 apart, and somewhere in that gap is the actual amount of room you have to live your life without either the IRS or your insurance company taking a bigger bite than they need to. Teresa says most of her clients never find this out until they've already blown past it. You ask what happens if you do. She says you pay full price, the sticker price, which around here runs several $100s a month more than what you'd pay staying under the line. Money you'd be handing back for the privilege of technically being allowed to spend more of your own. You end the call and sit there a while, the couple beside you finally ordering the megas. It's a strange kind of math to sit with in a beer garden on a Wednesday afternoon. The realization that freedom, at your income level, isn't really about how much you have. It's about how precisely you're willing to manage the $1,850 of room the government left you to work with. You close the laptop and start thinking about what happens if the number underneath all of it stops cooperating. Free and still doing the math. You still open the account most mornings. Not out of worry, out of habit, the same habit that built it in the first place. The number moves. Some months it moves in your favor. Some months it doesn't. And you sit with that the same way you sat with the $1,850, doing the arithmetic nobody else in your life has to do before breakfast. Danielle still picks up the check. Roy still has your file somewhere. Occupation left blank. None of that bothers you the way it used to. What stays with you is smaller than that. A Wednesday morning, a library that opens at 9, a transfer that goes out whether you're watching or not. You got the mornings. You didn't get to stop counting. The next time someone asks what you do, you'll know exactly what to say. You still won't know how to make it sound simple.